Hi again then guys, and welcome to another Forza Motorsport 7 car review. And if you want to get more specific about it, we are this time once again talking about another Le Mans style prototype, more specifically an LMP2 car. Now these are vehicles which I'm not really a huge fan of. I much prefer LMP1s and also Group Cs in particular, and LMP 900s as well. They're pretty cool. Certainly some of my favourites are in that category, such as the Cadillac and the Panos. But this one, not so much. The predecessor of this car in the world of Forza is arguably the Mazda Lola B09-86, which is a brilliant prototype. I'm not a huge LMP2 fan. The Porsche RS Spider might be my favourite in that category on Forza, but I'm just not really that into LMP2s, and even less into LMP3s. The Mazda B09, though, was a brilliant car. On every Forza game until recent years, it was one of the quickest prototypes in the game. You could literally get it up around 260 miles per hour, not only forwards, but in reverse as well. So it was definitely a standout machine. Now though, that car has been severely neutered, made much more realistic, and it's the worst for it. However, this car to me seemed kind of like a needless variant. It's another Mazda Lola branded vehicle, has a similar chassis layout, basically an updated version of the B09 form. That's not necessarily wrong, but what really puzzled me is that this car, which was a DLC vehicle on Forza 6, the B12-80, also a Lola built Mazda branded prototype, is a car which a big fuss is made about on Forza 7. Not only can you not buy this car, but it doesn't even have a quoted price, which is pretty strange, given that it's one of the only cars in the game to have that to its name. But not only that, you have to unlock this car after completing all of the championships. You can then return to one of them and unlock it in a specific event. So why the fanfare? Why make this car in particular so special in the way that you unlock it? Well, initially I thought that there wasn't really much of a reason, until I took a look at the specs, because I noticed that the specs on this car are very interesting. The power isn't that impressive, but that's not uncommon for an LMP2 car. They're nowhere near as powerful. It has 450 horsepower in stock form, and when fully tuned, it's still not that great, about 570 or so, de-restricted. But the torque was what caught my eye, because it has a lot more. 550 pound-feet stock. That's very interesting. Not many race cars have more torque than power, especially not modern ones. And when they do, that tends to signify something very special, or at least something which I view as very special on a racing game. And that is that this car is a diesel. It's a diesel prototype. Now in the LMP1 category, we've had a few of those on a number of racing games for quite a while. The Audi R18, the R10, the e-tron, now of course others as well, like Peugeot with the 908. But this one is one of the only, if not the only, diesel LMP2 cars that Forza has featured. So that alone does make it special. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the best in class, and I would say it categorically isn't in some ways, but it at least makes it a nice novelty choice, and as many of you guys know, that immediately appeals to me because I love oddball cars, or cars which do things in a different way. Not because they have to, but because they choose to. And this is one of those vehicles. Now I mentioned that it has far more torque than power stock. That is carried over when tuned as well. As I mentioned, you're looking at 550 pound-feet in stock form. Stock, of course, is a very relative term for a prototype, but still. Fully tuned though, or more specifically de-restricted, you're looking at almost 700 pound-feet. That's pretty massive, especially in a car that weighs, as you'd assume from a prototype, not very much, not much more, over 900 kilos, in fact, 953. And in stock form, you're looking at 472 horsepower per tonne, and of course that goes up significantly when tuned. Now the class on the car, in, again, stock form, is P955. That's reasonable. It's not ridiculously high, but it's high. Of course, it's a prototype, so it's going to be high. But at the same time, that does of course lead us to the question, how good is this car in practice? Is the fact that it's a diesel more of an in-game gimmick, or does it actually have some kind of special use or special advantage over other cars. Well, I'm not sure how that impacts fuel economy in the world of Forza. I don't know if the fuel use changes that much if you use a diesel over a petrol. It might do, I haven't tested it, but in particular it does change the way the car performs. For instance, the engine redlines even de-restricted at about 5,000 RPM, so peak power and peak torque are very accessible. You don't have to work the engine hard at all. Of course, it's a diesel, that's what they do. They can go all day producing huge power and torque, and they won't show anywhere near the kind of signs of stress and strain and wear and tear as the equivalent, say, rotary or petrol or even electric car might show. That's a great advantage to have, especially for an endurance prototype, which is, of course, what this is. Now, in the world of Forza, endurance in terms of reliability doesn't really matter that much. It's not like the car's going to break down as it could in real life, but it does give you some interesting performance differences. Because not only is the redline lower, and of course the car sounds different, it's more muffled, more gruff, just like a real diesel, which I personally love, but it also delivers that torque and power in a much more accessible, much more responsive way. It doesn't sound more responsive, it doesn't have the howling fanfare of a V10 or a V12 or the roar of a V8, but what it does have is instant torque, or basically instant torque. It's not quite electric car level in terms of torque delivery, but you know what I mean. It gives you that torque very quickly, very easily, and it never feels like the engine's working that hard, which is another great advantage of a diesel. In terms of putting the power down, well, it's actually pretty good. It doesn't wheel spin anywhere near as much as it easily could with that kind of torque. And that is partially due to the way a diesel engine delivers its torque. Because it does it at such a lazy level, it doesn't have the same wheel spin effect, or the torque steer effect, for instance, if it were front wheel drive, as that equivalent torque from a petrol engine would, because of the way it delivers it. That's pretty cool, or at least I think so. In terms of handling, it's dependent on the diff, the suspension, the downforce, all that kind of usual stuff, but it's pretty well balanced. It's nice to drive. I'm not going to call it the best LMP2 car in the game or anything rash like that, but it is certainly a pleasure to work with. It's smooth, it's measured. The handling, if anything, with the way I've tuned it at least, is a little bit more on the side of understeer rather than oversteer, which I like. Some people I know don't, but that depends on personal preference. Overall then, this is a car which I would recommend trying to pick up for two reasons. One, because you don't have to buy it, which is always a nice advantage, so you might as well, but also if you're the kind of person like me who loves race cars that aren't just trying to be the best, in the game that is, in real life obviously they do want to win, but also that just does things differently. Cars like your Chaparrals, your Brabham BT46Bs, your Williams FW15Cs, those race cars that were just different. And this is one of those. So, that's it overall for this particular review. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.